I'm Captain Esther Cross, 29 years old, U.S. Air Force. I worked my way up from a logistics officer with a borrowed uniform bag and no family name to fall back on. For years, I believed discipline and preparation could solve anything: early mornings, long deployments, no excuses. But the morning I stopped to help a man with a broken-down car outside Joint Base Andrews, then walked into my officer interview and saw him behind the desk in 4-star whites, everything I thought I knew about rank, respect, and fairness changed. Have you ever done the right thing, only to feel like it might cost you everything? If you've ever been underestimated, blindsided, or humbled by someone you were trying to impress, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before we get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to prove your worth after being written off, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about standing tall when it matters most. What happened next might surprise you. I was running late the morning everything changed. Not fashionably late, not 5 minutes and an apology late, the kind of late that makes your stomach knot and your hands shake on the wheel. The interview was scheduled for 0900 hours at Joint Base Andrews, and I was still 20 minutes out at 0840. Rain hammered the windshield. Traffic crawled. Every red light felt personal. I'm Captain Esther Cross, United States Air Force, and I don't do late. My father, Master Sergeant David Cross, retired after 26 years in logistics, raised me on the principle that 15 minutes early is on time. My mother, a nurse at Walter Reed for 3 decades, taught me that competence speaks quietly. I graduated from the Air Force Academy 6 years ago, commissioned as a second lieutenant, and worked my way up through flight operations and logistics coordination. I've pulled extra shifts. I've mentored junior officers. I've done everything by the book because I believed the book was fair. The staff billet I was interviewing for that morning represented everything I'd been working toward. A position under Joint Command, working directly with inter-service operations, the kind of assignment that separates captains who plateau from those who make major. I'd prepared for 3 weeks. I knew the mission brief backward. I'd rehearsed answers to questions I was certain they'd ask. None of that preparation included sitting in traffic, watching the clock tick past 0845. My phone rang. I answered on Bluetooth. Esther, where are you? Major Rena Lopez, one of the few people I trusted completely. We'd met during a deployment to Ramstein, bonded over terrible German coffee, and shared frustration with bureaucratic inefficiency. Stuck on the Beltway. There's an accident. You're cutting it close. I know. They're not going to care about traffic, Esther. Murray's on the panel. Admiral James Murray. I'd never met him, but his reputation preceded him like weather. Former submariner, 3 combat deployments, known for running the tightest operations in the Pentagon. Fair, people said, but exacting. The kind of officer who believed that how you did anything was how you did everything. I'll make it, I said. Call me after. The traffic broke at 0848. I took the exit too fast, tires hydroplaning slightly on the wet pavement. The base was only 2 miles away now. I could still make it. I had to make it. That's when I saw him. An older man stood beside a stalled sedan just outside the main gate, civilian clothes soaked through, hood up. The car's hazards blinked weakly. He was bent over the open driver's door, phone in hand, shaking it like that might summon a charge from nowhere. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the exhaustion in his posture. I should have kept driving. I was already late. This wasn't my problem. Someone else would stop. But I was my father's daughter, and my father never drove past someone who needed help. I pulled over, threw on my hazards, and got out into the rain. Sir, you need help? He looked up surprised. Mid-50s, maybe older, with gray at his temples, and the kind of weathered face that comes from years of early mornings and hard decisions. His eyes were sharp despite the exhaustion. Car won't turn over. Phone's dead. His voice was calm, almost resigned. You call a tow? Can't. No charge. I glanced at my watch. 0852. The gate was half a mile ahead. I could see it from here. Hang on. I pulled out my wallet, extracted a $100 bill, money I'd been saving for new running shoes, and held it out. There's a service station a mile back. Get a tow, get your phone charged. Keep the change. He stared at the money. I can't, you can. I'm late for something. You look like you've been here a while. Just take it. He took the bill slowly, like he was handling something fragile. What's your name? Captain Esther Cross, sir. Air Force. I really have to go. Thank you, Captain. I ran back to my car, pulled into traffic, and made the gate at 0856. The security officer, Captain Mark Tanner, checked my ID with the kind of casual efficiency that comes from checking 10,000 IDs. Cutting it close, Captain. Bad traffic. He glanced back toward where I'd come from, toward the stalled car, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. But he waved me through. I parked in the visitor's lot and ran. Actually ran, briefcase in one hand, cover in the other, trying not to look like I was sprinting to the most important interview of my career. I made it to the building at 0858, took 30 seconds in the bathroom to check my uniform and catch my breath, and arrived at the briefing room at 0900 exactly. Captain Cross, reporting as ordered. The aide, a Navy commander with perfect posture and a tablet, smiled professionally. They're ready for you. Go ahead in. I opened the door. The room smelled like coffee and floor polish. 3 flags stood in the corner: Army, Navy, Air Force. Portraits of the President and Secretary of Defense hung on the wall. A long table, 3 officers behind it. Lieutenant Colonel Andre Shaw, Air Force, someone I'd heard was also gunning for the billet. A Marine colonel whose name I didn't catch. And in the center, the man from the roadside sat behind the desk in navy whites, for stars on his shoulder boards. Admiral James Murray. I stopped breathing. He looked up from the folder in front of him, made eye contact, and smiled slightly. Not smug, not gotcha, just the barest acknowledgement of something shared. Captain Cross, he said. Good to see you again. My mouth went dry. Heat crawled up my neck. Every eye in the room turned toward me, then back to him, questions forming. Please have a seat. I sat. My hands were shaking. I folded them in my lap. The interview proceeded like any interview. They asked about my logistics experience, my time at Ramstein, how I'd handle inter-service coordination challenges, my thoughts on readiness metrics. I answered on autopilot, my brain split between the questions and the screaming certainty that I'd just humiliated myself in front of the one person whose opinion mattered most. Shaw asked something about supply chain vulnerabilities. I answered. The Marine colonel asked about my leadership philosophy. I gave him something about trust and accountability. Admiral Murray asked about a time I'd had to make a decision under pressure. I told him about a maintenance crisis in Germany, how we'd kept 3 C-17s operational during a surge, how I'd coordinated with 6 different units across 4 time zones. I didn't mention that morning. Neither did he. The interview ended at 0940. They thanked me. I saluted and left. Outside, Commander Sarah Nguyen, the Admiral's aide, was waiting with her tablet. You did well in there. Did I? She smiled. He doesn't usually smile. I drove back to base in silence, replaying every moment. The way he'd looked when I'd handed him the money. The way he'd thanked me. The way he'd said my name in that room, like we were old acquaintances. Had I seemed flustered? Unprepared? Like someone who couldn't handle pressure? Rena called that afternoon. How'd it go? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I told her everything. The car, the money, walking into that room and seeing him there. She was quiet for a long time. Jesus, Esther. I know. No, I mean, that's either the best thing that could have happened or the worst. Which do you think it is? I don't know, she said. But at least he'll remember you. That was exactly what I was afraid of. Days passed. Then a week. Then 10 days. Nothing. I checked my email compulsively. Every morning at 0600, every afternoon at 1300, every evening before bed. Nothing from headquarters. Nothing from Admiral Murray's office. Nothing from personnel. Just the usual stream of logistics reports, scheduling updates, and mandatory training reminders. I threw myself into work. 12-hour days at the flight operations desk. I volunteered for the weekend duty roster. I updated supply manifests that didn't need updating. Anything to avoid sitting still, avoid thinking about that interview, about the way the Admiral had looked at me across that table. Major Lopez found me in my office on day 11, eating a protein bar over a spreadsheet at 1900 hours. Go home, Esther. I'm finishing this audit. The audit isn't due for 2 weeks. She sat down across from me, pushed my laptop closed. You're spiraling. I'm working. You're hiding. She leaned back in her chair. Have you considered that maybe the silence isn't a rejection? Maybe they're just processing candidates. Shaw probably got it. He's got more joint experience. Better connections. Shaw is also an insufferable politician who spends more time networking than actually working. I managed to smile. You're biased. I'm observant. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through something. I've been asking around about Murray. Quietly. Rena, relax. I was subtle. Called it research for a paper I'm writing. She found what she was looking for. He spent 28 years as a submariner before transitioning to joint operations. 3 combat deployments. Commanded a carrier strike group. The people who've worked for him say he's demanding but fair. Values initiative over protocol. Hates bureaucratic games. Why are you telling me this? Because you're beating yourself up over helping someone who needed help. You think you looked unprofessional. But what if he saw exactly what he needed to see? Which is someone who doesn't need permission to do the right thing. I wanted to believe her. But belief required optimism, and optimism felt dangerous. I'd spent 6 years learning that the military rewarded consistency, not spontaneity. You followed the chain of command. You waited your turn. You didn't improvise, especially not on the day of the most important interview of your career. I handed a 4-star Admiral $100 on the side of the road, I said. Then I showed up to interview for him looking like I'd just run a marathon. How is that doing anything right? You were late because you stopped to help someone. That's different than being late because you hit snooze. The result is the same. Is it? She stood up. The Esther Cross I know doesn't make excuses. She also doesn't usually need this much convincing that she's good at her job. So either you're more shaken by this than you're admitting, or you've been waiting for permission to fail for a long time. She left before I could answer. I sat there in the empty office, fluorescent lights humming, and realized she was right. Not about the Admiral. I had no idea what he thought, but about me. I'd spent 6 years building a perfect record, never late, never wrong, never anything less than exactly what was expected. And somewhere along the way, I'd started believing that perfection was the same as worthiness. The truth was simpler and more uncomfortable. I'd stopped to help that man because it didn't occur to me not to. Because my father would have stopped. Because my mother would have stopped. Because it was raining and his phone was dead and he looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the car. I hadn't been trying to impress anyone. I'd been trying to get to an interview. The stopping was just who I was. And if that wasn't good enough for the Admiral, then maybe the position wasn't right for me anyway. The thought should have been devastating. Instead, it felt like setting down something heavy. I went home. I slept 8 hours for the first time in 2 weeks. I woke up at 05:30 and went for a run, not because I needed to train, but because I wanted to. At work, I focused on the tasks in front of me, not the email that might or might not arrive. I had lunch with Rena and we talked about her daughter's soccer team, not my career. 3 days later, at 1400 hours on a Tuesday, my phone rang. Unknown number, Pentagon area code. Captain Cross. Captain, this is Commander Nguyen from Admiral Murray's office. Do you have a moment? My heart rate doubled. Yes, ma'am. The Admiral would like you to report to headquarters Friday at 0900 for temporary duty orders. Should be approximately 6 weeks. Can you make that work? Yes. Yes, ma'am. Can I ask what the assignment is? Logistics audit for joint readiness operations. You'll be briefed when you arrive. The Admiral specifically requested you. I was still processing specifically requested when she continued. Oh, and Captain? Bring comfortable shoes. The hours are long. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there, phone in hand, trying to understand what had just happened. Not the staff billet. Not a permanent assignment. A temporary audit. 6 weeks at headquarters, long hours, working directly under the Admiral's command. It felt like being placed on probation and given an opportunity at the same time. Rena called 10 minutes later. Did you hear? How do you already know? Shah's aide is dating someone in personnel. He's furious. Apparently, he got a very polite rejection this morning. They gave it to someone else? They didn't give it to anyone. They're reopening the search. But they pulled you for the audit. I don't understand. Murray specifically requested you, Esther, for an assignment that puts you in direct contact with his office for 6 weeks, during which time you'll be working joint readiness operations, which is exactly what the staff billet oversees. She paused. It's a working interview. He's testing you. That seems smart? Yeah. He gets to see how you actually work, not how you perform in a conference room. And you get 6 weeks to prove you deserve the permanent position. I thought about that. About the Admiral sitting in that stalled car, soaking wet, watching officers drive past. About how he'd smiled when I walked into that room. You think he planned it? The car? I think he's been a 4-star Admiral for 6 years and doesn't do anything accidentally. Friday morning, I reported to headquarters at 0845. Commander Gwynn met me in the lobby, crisp and efficient. Captain Cross. Good timing. She handed me a security badge and a thick folder. You'll be working out of the Joint Operations Center, 3rd floor. Your desk is 3 to 117. Admiral Murray wants to see you first. My stomach tightened. Now. She led me through corridors that smelled like coffee and floor wax, past conference rooms and office pods, up 2 flights of stairs. The Admiral's office was at the end of a quiet hallway, door open, American flag beside it. He was standing at the window, hands behind his back, looking out at the parade ground. He turned when we entered. Captain Cross. Thank you for coming on short notice. Sir. I stood at attention. At ease. He gestured to a chair. Sit. Commander Gwynn, that'll be all. She left, closing the door behind her. The Admiral sat across from me, not behind his desk, but in the adjacent chair, like this was a conversation between equals. It wasn't, but I appreciated the gesture. I wanted to talk to you before you started, he said. About that morning. Here it comes, I thought. The explanation. The apology I'd need to make. I wasn't testing you, he said. I blinked. Sir, I know what people are saying. That I was undercover, running some elaborate evaluation. That I set up the whole scenario to see who would stop. He shook his head. My car broke down. My phone died. It was raining. I was late for my own briefing. And I was standing there trying to figure out how to explain to the base commander why a 4-star Admiral was hitchhiking when you pulled over. I don't understand. You gave me $100 and told me to keep the change. You didn't ask my name. You didn't wait for thanks. You just helped someone who needed help and kept moving. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know how rare that is? Sir, I was just late for an interview with me. Yes, which means you had every incentive to keep driving. But you didn't. And when you walked into that room 10 minutes later and realized who I was, you didn't try to leverage it. You didn't mention it. You just answered the questions and did your job. I didn't know what to say to that. This audit, he continued, is real work. Not a test. I need someone who can coordinate between 4 branches, manage competing priorities, and cut through bureaucratic nonsense to get things done. Commander Nguyen said you were qualified. Your record says you're competent. But that morning told me something neither of those things could. What's that, sir? That you make good decisions under pressure. And that you do the right thing even when no one's watching. He stood. The staff billet is still open. But I don't give permanent assignments based on interviews. I give them based on performance. 6 weeks, Captain. Show me what you can do. I stood, saluted. Yes, sir. At the door, I paused. Sir? For what it's worth, I didn't stop to impress you. I didn't know who you were. I know, he said. That's the point. The Joint Operations Center occupied half of the 3rd floor, a maze of cubicles and conference rooms connected by hallways that all looked identical. My desk was a metal rectangle in a pod of 4, surrounded by filing cabinets and whiteboards covered in acronyms I'd need to learn. The audit folder Commander Nguyen had given me was 3 inches thick. The assignment was straightforward on paper: evaluate logistics coordination across 4 military branches for the Joint Readiness Task Force. Identify redundancies, communication gaps, and resource allocation failures. Provide actionable recommendations within 6 weeks. In practice, it meant untangling decades of inter-service politics, competing procurement systems, and officers who guarded their jurisdictions like territory. I started by reading everything: supply chain manifests, maintenance schedules, after-action reports from the last 3 joint exercises. By the end of day 1, my eyes burned and I'd filled 2 legal pads with notes. By the end of day 2, I understood why they needed an audit. The system wasn't broken so much as held together by duct tape and institutional inertia. On day 3, I met the team. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes, Navy Logistics, 20 years in supply chain management. Major David Chin, Army Operations, 2 combat deployments and a master's in systems engineering. Captain Michelle Torres, Marines, 5 years in procurement with a reputation for getting things done regardless of regulations. They were professionals, competent, and clearly skeptical of the Air Force captain who'd appeared out of nowhere with the Admiral's blessing. "So you're Murray's pick," Torres said during our first meeting, not quite hostile but not friendly either. "I'm here to do an audit. We've had 3 audits in 4 years. What makes this one different?" "This one has a deadline." I pulled up my preliminary findings on the conference room screen. Right now, when the Navy needs parts, they requisition through their supply system. When the Army needs the same parts, they requisition through theirs. The Air Force has a 3rd system. The Marines have a 4th. None of them talk to each other in real time. So we end up with the Navy sitting on surplus alternators while the Army is grounded waiting for the same part. "We know that," Chin said. "Everyone knows that. So why hasn't it been fixed?" "Because fixing it requires someone with enough authority to tell 4 branches to change their systems. And no one wants to be the branch that blinks first." I looked at him. "Then we make them blink together." Hayes laughed, not entirely kindly. "Good luck with that, Captain." The first week was reconnaissance. I interviewed supply officers, maintenance chiefs, logistics coordinators. I sat in on procurement meetings and listened to people argue about requisition codes. I mapped the flow of information and resources through a system designed by committee and modified by crisis. The hours were brutal. 0700 to 2000 most days, longer when deadlines loomed. I ate lunch at my desk. I learned to survive on coffee and vending machine protein bars. The work itself was meticulous and frustrating, the kind of thing that required both analytical precision and diplomatic finesse. I had to understand the technical problems and navigate the political ones. Admiral Murray appeared occasionally, usually without warning. He'd walk through the center, stop at desks, ask questions. When he stopped at mine on day 8, I was shoulder-deep in a spreadsheet showing equipment downtime across 3 bases. "Finding anything interesting, Captain?" I stood. "Yes, sir. We're losing approximately 400 man-hours per week to equipment waiting for parts that exist in the system, but can't be accessed efficiently. For 100 hours. Conservatively. Could be twice that if we account for cascading delays." "What's your recommendation?" "Unified inventory system with real-time visibility across branches. It'll require new software, training, and most importantly, agreement on standardized protocols." "Who's fighting it?" "Everyone, sir." Quietly. I pulled up another screen. Each branch has spent millions on their current system. No one wants to admit they need to start over. He studied the data. "How long to implement your recommendation?" "If everyone cooperates?" 18 months. "Realistically?" 3 years. "We don't have 3 years." "No, sir." He was quiet for a moment, hands in his pockets, eyes on the spreadsheet. "Then, what's the interim solution?" That was the right question. Not the perfect solution or the ideal solution, but the one we could actually implement. I'd been working on it for 3 days. Liaison system. We assign cross-branch logistics coordinators at major hubs. They have access to all 4 inventory systems and authority to transfer resources between branches without going through normal channels. It's not elegant, but it would cut response time by at least 60%. How many coordinators? 12 to start. Could expand based on results. Can you have a proposal on my desk by Friday? Yes, sir. He nodded and moved on to the next desk. Hayes watched him go, then looked at me with something approaching respect. You just got him to commit to cross-branch coordinators in under 3 minutes. I got him to ask for a proposal. Same thing. If Murray asks for a proposal, he's already decided to do it. He just needs the documentation for when he sells it upstairs. I spent the next 2 days building the proposal. Torres helped with the Marine side. Chen provided Army contacts. Hayes connected me with Navy supply chiefs who'd been advocating for something similar for years. By Friday at 1600, I had a 30-page document with implementation timelines, cost estimates, and contingency plans. Commander Nguyen took it without comment. He'll review it over the weekend. Monday morning, 0800, my phone rang. The Admiral wanted to see me. His office felt different this time. More formal. He sat behind his desk, my proposal open in front of him, margins covered in handwritten notes. Your liaison system, he said without preamble. It's a Band-Aid. Yes, sir. But it's a Band-Aid we can apply now while we work on the permanent fix. Who's going to run it? That's above my pay grade, sir. I'm asking your opinion, Captain. I thought about it. About the people I'd met, the politics I'd navigated, the resistance I'd encountered. Someone with joint experience. Someone who understands all 4 systems well enough to see the gaps. Someone junior enough to be hands-on but senior enough to have credibility. Someone like you. My stomach dropped. Sir, I'm only scheduled here for 6 weeks. Plans change. He closed the proposal. The staff billet I interviewed you for? It just got more interesting. I'm creating a new position, Deputy Director, Joint Logistics Coordination. You'd report directly to my office, oversee the liaison program, and spearhead the long-term systems integration project. Sir, I'm a captain. That's a major's billet. Maybe a lieutenant colonel's. So get promoted. You're overdue anyway. He leaned back. I'm not offering you this because you gave me $100, Captain Cross. I'm offering it because in 2 weeks you've done more to untangle this mess than the last 3 audit teams combined. You ask good questions. You build consensus. And you don't get territorial about whose idea wins as long as the mission succeeds. I didn't know what to say. This was bigger than the original staff billet. More responsibility, more visibility, more risk. What if I fail? Then you fail. But I don't think you will. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. You have 72 hours to decide. Talk to your family, your mentor, whoever you need to talk to. But this is a one-time offer. If you turn it down, I'll find someone else and you'll go back to your current assignment. And the audit is already paying dividends. Commander Hayes told me you're the first Air Force officer she's worked with who actually listens. Coming from her, that's practically a love letter. I left his office in a daze. Deputy Director. Joint Logistics Coordination. A position that didn't exist 2 weeks ago, created specifically because I'd identified a problem and proposed a solution. It was everything I'd wanted and more than I'd imagined. It was also terrifying. Rena picked up on the second ring. Tell me. I told her everything. The proposal, the new position, the 72-hour deadline. She was quiet for a long moment. Esther, do you know how rare this is? Officers spend years positioning themselves for opportunities like this. And you fell into it by being yourself. I didn't fall into it. I worked for it. Exactly. So why are you calling me instead of celebrating? Because I'm scared I'm not ready. No one's ready. That's not the question. The question is, do you want it? Did I? I thought about the last 2 weeks, the long hours and hard problems, the satisfaction of seeing pieces fit together, the respect I'd earned from people like Hayes and Chin. I thought about my father, who'd spent 26 years in logistics and never made it past Master Sergeant because he didn't play politics. I thought about my mother, who believed competence spoke quietly but showed up consistently. Yes, I said. I want it. Then stop looking for permission and say yes. I called Commander Nguyen that afternoon. Tell the Admiral I accept. He'll be pleased, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You start officially in 2 weeks. That gives us time to process your promotion paperwork and finalize the position charter. Promotion? to Major. Effective immediately. Congratulations, Major Cross. I hung up and stared at my phone. 2 weeks ago, I'd been a captain hoping for a staff position. Now I was a major with a portfolio that spanned 4 military branches and reported directly to a 4-star admiral. The work got harder after that. Not because the problems were more complex, but because the stakes were higher and the resistance was real. Creating the liaison program meant convincing 12 officers from 4 different branches to take on additional duty and learn unfamiliar systems. It meant negotiating with supply chiefs who'd been doing things the same way for 20 years. It meant sitting through meetings where people agreed to my face and undermined the initiative behind my back. Torres became an unexpected ally. She'd been skeptical at first, but once she saw the liaison system actually working, she became its fiercest advocate. Hayes remained cautiously supportive. Chin was professional but distant, still unclear whether I'd earned my position or simply lucked into it. The Admiral watched everything but intervened rarely. Twice he stepped in when senior officers tried to block the program. Once he overruled a procurement decision that would have delayed implementation by 6 months. Otherwise, he let me sink or swim on my own merits. I swam. Barely some days. But I swam. The liaison program launched on a Tuesday in March, for months after that morning in the rain. We started with 6 coordinators instead of 12, assigned to the highest traffic logistics hubs: Norfolk, San Diego, Fort Bragg, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Ramstein, and Okinawa. Each coordinator had access to all 4 branch inventory systems and direct authority to transfer resources across service lines without traditional approval chains. The first week was chaos. 2 coordinators called within 48 hours, overwhelmed by the volume of requests and the resistance from supply officers who resented someone bypassing their authority. One Army logistics chief at Fort Bragg refused to honor cross-branch transfers, citing regulations that technically supported his position. I spent 3 days on the phone, alternating between patient explanation and pointed reminders about whose authority backed this program. On day 8, we had our first major success. A Marine aviation unit at Camp Pendleton had been grounded for 6 days waiting for hydraulic actuators. The Navy had 17 of the same parts sitting in a warehouse in San Diego, 40 miles away. Our liaison coordinator, a Navy lieutenant commander named Rachel Foster, identified the match, authorized the transfer, and had the parts delivered within 4 hours. The Marines were flying again by that afternoon. Admiral Murray called me into his office the next morning. I heard about Pendleton. Yes, sir. Lieutenant Commander Foster did excellent work. The Marines are pleased. That squadron commander called me personally to say so. He handed me a message printout. He also wants to know why we're not doing this everywhere. We are, sir. It just takes time to change institutional habits. How much time? The coordinators need about 90 days to establish credibility and build relationships. After that, it should get easier. Should, he repeated. What's the biggest obstacle right now? I'd been thinking about this for weeks. Trust, sir. Supply officers don't trust coordinators they don't know to make decisions about their resources. And coordinators don't trust that they'll be backed up when they make unpopular calls. Are you backing them up? Every time. But I'm a major. When a bird colonel pushes back, my authority only goes so far. He nodded slowly. I'll put out a message. Make it clear that anyone obstructing the liaison program answers to me personally. That help? Yes, sir. The message went out that afternoon, 3 paragraphs from a 4-star admiral to every supply officer and logistics commander in the joint force. It was politely worded and professionally framed, but the meaning was clear. This program has my full support, and interference will be noted. The resistance didn't disappear overnight, but it quieted. Officers who'd been stonewalling coordinators suddenly became cooperative. Requests that had been delayed for procedural reasons started moving. By the end of month 2, we were averaging 47 cross-branch transfers per week. By month 3, that number hit 72. The work consumed me. 16-hour days became routine. I ate dinner at my desk more often than not, usually whatever Commander Nguyen ordered for the Admiral's staff. I missed my brother's wedding because I was in San Diego troubleshooting a systems integration failure. I stopped going to the gym, stopped calling friends, stopped pretending I had a life outside this office. Rena cornered me in the parking lot one evening at 2200 hours. She'd driven an hour from her base just to check on me. You look terrible. Thanks. I'm serious, Esther. When's the last time you slept more than 5 hours? I unlocked my car. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground. The program needs a director who doesn't collapse from exhaustion. She leaned against my car, blocking the door. You're doing important work. I know that. But you're not going to make it 3 years like this, let alone 30. What do you want me to say? That I'll work less? I can't. Not right now. Then delegate. You've got 6 coordinators and a support staff. Use them. I do use them. You micromanage them. There's a difference. She pulled out her phone, showed me a text chain. Torres told me you edited her after-action report 3 times last week. Hayes said you insisted on reviewing every transfer request personally. You're not trusting the system you built. That stung because it was true. I'd spent months convincing others to trust the coordinators, but I hadn't fully trusted them myself. Every request that went wrong reflected on me. Every inefficiency was my failure. I'd become the bottleneck I was trying to eliminate. Old habits, I said quietly. Old fears, Rena corrected. You're afraid that if something goes wrong, they'll say you didn't earn this position. That you only got it because you helped the Admiral that morning. People already say that. So, let them. You know what you've accomplished. I know what you've accomplished. And Murray knows what you've accomplished, or he wouldn't keep expanding your portfolio. She opened my car door. Go home. Sleep. Come back tomorrow and start actually leading instead of just managing. Trust your people, Esther. That's what good officers do. I went home. I slept 9 hours. And the next morning, I called a meeting with all 6 coordinators via video conference. I've been holding too tight, I told them. You're professionals. You know your regions and your people better than I do. Starting today, you have full authority to approve transfers up to $100,000 without my review. Anything higher, flag it for me, but I'll trust your assessment unless there's a compelling reason not to. Foster spoke first. Major, are you sure? If something goes wrong, then we fix it. But I hired you because you're good at this. It's time I let you prove it. The change was immediate. Coordinators started moving faster, making decisions based on local knowledge rather than waiting for my approval. Transfer volumes increased. Response times dropped. And I finally had space to work on the long-term systems integration project, the permanent solution that would eventually make the liaison program unnecessary. Admiral Murray noticed. He called me in 6 weeks later, dropped a folder on his desk between us. Your promotion board results came in. My heart rate spiked. I'd been eligible for lieutenant colonel for 8 months, had submitted my package before taking this position. But I'd assumed the board wouldn't look favorably on an officer who'd spent less than a year in her current rank. Below the zone, he continued. 93rd percentile. The board noted your exceptional performance in joint operations and specifically cited the liaison program as evidence of strategic thinking and leadership. Below the zone meant promoted early, ahead of my peer group. 93rd percentile meant I'd outscored nearly everyone else eligible. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept the promotion and keep doing what you're doing. He leaned back. You've built something that works, Lieutenant Colonel. Now you get to see it through. The promotion ceremony was small, held in the same conference room where I'd interviewed 18 months earlier. My parents flew in. Rena stood beside them. Admiral Murray administered the oath and pinned on my new rank himself. Your father must be proud, he said quietly, adjusting the insignia. He is, sir. I met him briefly this morning. He told me you learned logistics from him. Everything important, yes, sir. He also said you learned to stop for people who need help. I met his eyes. He would have stopped that morning too. I know, the Admiral said. That's why you did. The reception afterward was brief. Cake, coffee, handshakes. Commander Nguyen gave me a card signed by the liaison coordinators. Torres drove up from Quantico just to attend. Chin, who'd remained professionally distant for months, shook my hand and said, "You earned this." Coming from him, it meant something. My father pulled me aside before they left. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, but his posture was still perfect and his eyes were still sharp. "I'm proud of you, Esther." "I know, Dad." "No, I mean," he paused, choosing words carefully. "I spent 26 years doing good work. Important work. But I never made it past Master Sergeant because I didn't play the political games. Didn't schmooze the right people. Just did my job and assumed that would be enough." He touched my new rank insignia. "You did your job. But you also did it in a way that people noticed. That matters. You taught me to do it right. I taught you to do it right. Your mother taught you to do it visibly. Together, that's a complete officer." He smiled. "I'm glad you listened to both of us." They left before dusk, my mother hugging me twice, my father saluting once with a grin that said he was only half joking. Rena stayed longer, helped me clean up the conference room. "You did good, Esther. We're not done yet." "No, but you're allowed to be proud of what you've accomplished so far." I thought about that. About the liaison program that was now processing an average of 94 transfers per week. About the systems integration project that had moved from proposal to pilot program. About the coordinators who no longer needed my approval for routine decisions. About the Admiral who'd taken a chance on someone who'd stopped to help a stranger in the rain. "I am proud," I said. "Scared sometimes. Overwhelmed, often. But proud. Good. Keep that." She grabbed her jacket. "Now go home and sleep. You look slightly less terrible than you did 6 months ago, but you're still running on fumes." She was right. I went home, slept 10 hours, and dreamed about nothing at all. The next 3 years were a blur of work, progress, setbacks, and small victories. The systems integration project moved through pilot phase, survived 2 budget challenges and 1 congressional inquiry, and finally launched across all 4 branches in April of my 3rd year as deputy director. The liaison program gradually became obsolete, which was exactly the goal. By the time the new unified inventory system went live, we'd reduced average response time for cross-branch resource requests from 11 days to 4 hours. Admiral Murray retired in June, 6 months after the integration launched. His farewell ceremony was held at the Pentagon, full honors, 400 people in attendance. He gave a speech about service and sacrifice, about the privilege of leading good people toward difficult goals. He didn't mention the liaison program specifically, but he caught my eye when he talked about officers who saw problems and fixed them instead of waiting for permission. At the reception afterward, he found me near the dessert table. "Lieutenant Colonel Cross. I hear you're being considered for full colonel." "Yes, sir. The board meets in August. You'll make it. Your record is strong." He picked up a cookie, examined it like it was a logistics report. "I also hear you're being courted by 3 different commands for senior staff positions." "Word travels fast, sir." "It does when you're good at what you do." He set the cookie down uneaten. "Can I give you some advice, one more time?" "Of course, sir." "Don't let them stick you behind a desk permanently. You're good at strategy and administration, but your real skill is seeing how systems affect people. Stay close enough to the work to remember why it matters." "I will, sir." "And Esther." He rarely used my first name. "That morning, when you stopped, I think about it sometimes. How you didn't hesitate. How you didn't need to know who I was to decide I was worth helping. That's not something they teach at the academy. That's character. Don't lose it as you climb higher." "I won't, sir." He nodded, shook my hand once, and moved on to the next well-wisher. I watched him work the room, still commanding attention even out of uniform, still exactly the officer everyone said he was, demanding, fair, and genuinely interested in making things better. 3 months later, I made full colonel. The promotion to full colonel came with a new assignment, Director of Joint Logistics Operations, overseeing the entire integration system I'd helped build. The position carried more authority and exponentially more responsibility. I moved into an office with windows, inherited a staff of 23, and spent my first month learning that senior leadership was less about solving problems personally and more about enabling others to solve them. I was 39 years old. Most colonels reached this rank in their mid-40s. The fast track had become faster, and with it came scrutiny. There were whispers in Pentagon corridors about the officer who'd risen from captain to colonel in 10 years, who'd built her career on one chance encounter with an admiral. Some of it was professional jealousy. Some was legitimate concern about whether I had the depth of experience for the responsibility. I let the whispers happen. I'd learned from Admiral Murray that you couldn't control what people said, only what you did. So I focused on the work. The unified inventory system was functioning, but not optimal. We were processing requests faster, but error rates remained higher than acceptable. Supply officers in some branches were still working around the system rather than through it, reverting to old habits when the new process felt cumbersome. I spent 6 months traveling to major bases, sitting with logistics teams, watching how they actually used the system versus how we designed it to be used. At Ramstein, I found a master sergeant who'd created a shadow tracking system in Excel because our interface didn't show him the information he needed. At Norfolk, a Navy supply chief had trained his entire team to submit requests through unofficial channels first, then backfill the official paperwork later. At Joint Base Lewis McChord, they'd simply stopped using the system for anything time-sensitive. I could have written up violations and demanded compliance. Instead, I asked questions. What would make the system work for you? The answers were consistent: faster search functions, better visibility into request status, simplified approval workflows for routine transfers, and most importantly, a way to talk to real people when the system failed instead of submitting help tickets into a void. I brought those findings back to headquarters, assembled a team of developers and users, and spent 8 months rebuilding the interface based on what the actual users needed. We added real-time chat support. We simplified the approval matrix. We created customizable dashboards so officers could see the information relevant to their specific role without wading through data they didn't need. The pushback came from the program office that had built the original system. They'd spent 3 years and $40 million on development. My proposed changes represented an implicit criticism of their work. Colonel Cross, with respect, your suggestions would require significant recoding, the program director, an Air Force colonel named Richard Vance, said during a review meeting. We're talking about millions of dollars and at least 18 months of development. We're also talking about a system that 40% of users are actively avoiding, I replied. What's the cost of that? The system works. If users aren't following procedures, then we built a system that doesn't match how people actually work. I pulled up the data from my site visits. These aren't lazy officers cutting corners. These are professionals trying to complete their missions despite our system, not because of it. That's a design failure, not a user failure. Vance's face tightened. I'll need to consult with my leadership. Of course. But Colonel, I'm not asking for permission. I'm informing you of the changes we're implementing. You can be part of the solution, or you can explain to your leadership why you're defending a system that users hate. It was the kind of direct confrontation I'd avoided as a captain and major. But at this level, with this much responsibility, diplomatic language sometimes meant nothing changed. I'd learned from watching Admiral Murray that there was a time to build consensus and a time to simply make the decision and move forward. Vance's leadership agreed to the changes after I briefed the 3-star in charge of joint logistics on the user feedback and the cost of non-compliance. The redesign took 14 months instead of 18 and came in under budget. User adoption rates jumped from 60% to 92% within 6 months of launch. I turned 40 during the redesign project. Rena threw me a small party at her house, just family and close friends. My parents were there, both retired now, my father moving slower but still standing straight. My brother came with his wife and 2 kids. Torres drove up from Quantico. Even Commander Nguyen showed up with a card that read simply, Admiral Murray sends his congratulations. How is he? I asked. Bored. Consulting part-time, teaching a course at the Naval Academy, fishing more than he ever thought he would. She smiled. He asks about you every time I see him. Wants to know if you're still doing good work. Tell him yes. I will. Though I think he already knows. Late that evening, after most guests had left, my father and I sat on Rena's back porch, watching the kids chase fireflies in the yard. You've done well, Esther. Thanks, Dad. No, I mean he paused, the same way he had at my lieutenant colonel promotion. You've done things I never imagined. Not just the rank, but the scope of it. You've changed how the entire joint force handles logistics. That's legacy work. I had help. A lot of help. Good leaders always say that. He was quiet for a moment. Do you remember what I told you when you commissioned? That day at the academy. You told me a lot of things. I told you that rank is temporary, but reputation is permanent. That people will forget your title, but remember how you treated them. He looked at me. You've built both. That's rare. I thought about all the people who'd helped me get here. The coordinators who'd trusted my vision. Torres and Hayes and Chin who'd pushed back when I needed it. Rena who'd kept me grounded. Admiral Murray who'd given me a chance and then stepped back to let me prove myself. I don't know if I've built a reputation or just avoided major mistakes. Same thing sometimes. He stood, stretched. Your mother wants to leave soon. Early flight tomorrow. I'll say goodbye. He paused at the door. That Admiral Murray. The one you helped that morning. You ever tell him thank you? For what? For seeing you. Not everyone in his position would have. I did. Once. He said I was thanking him for the wrong thing. My father smiled. He sounds like a smart man. He is. After everyone left, Rena and I cleaned up in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of friendship. 40 years old, full colonel, running joint logistics for the entire Department of Defense, she said, loading the dishwasher. You remember when we were second lieutenants complaining about flight line duty? I remember you complaining. I was too scared to complain. You were never scared. You were careful. There's a difference. She closed the dishwasher, leaned against the counter. What's next for you? Next? You've accomplished everything you set out to do. The system works. Your reputation is solid. You'll probably make Brigadier General in a few years if you want it. So what's next? I hadn't thought about it in those terms. I'd been focused on the immediate work, the next problem to solve, the next improvement to implement. The idea of looking beyond that felt presumptuous, like celebrating before the mission was complete. I don't know, I admitted. That's okay. Just don't lose sight of why you started. She dried her hands. You didn't join to make colonel or run programs. You joined because you believed in service. In helping people. Don't let the rank make you forget that. I won't. Good. Because the Air Force needs more generals who remember what it was like to be a captain running late to an interview. I drove home thinking about that. About the captain I'd been, running through rain to help a stranger, because that's what you did. About the colonel I'd become, comfortable with authority, but hopefully not disconnected from the people the authority was meant to serve. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove to Joint Base Andrews, parked at the main gate, and walked the perimeter road where I'd stopped that morning 5 years ago. The road looked the same. The gate looked the same. But I was different. A car was pulled over about 100 yards ahead, hazards blinking. A young airman stood beside it, phone to his ear, clearly frustrated. I almost kept walking. I had a meeting at 0900, a briefing to review, a full day scheduled. Then I stopped. Need help, airman? He looked up, saw my rank, snapped to attention. Ma'am, no, I'm fine, just waiting for a tow. How long have you been waiting? About 40 minutes, ma'am. They said another hour. I pulled out my phone, called the motor pool directly, used my name and rank to expedite the service. They'd have someone there in 15 minutes. Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry to take your time, don't apologize. Everyone needs help sometimes. I started to leave, then turned back. What's your name, Airman? Parker, ma'am. Airman First Class Tyler Parker. Where are you headed, Parker? Briefing with my commander, ma'am. I'm getting my orders today. Deployment to Germany. First deployment? Yes, ma'am. It'll change you. In good ways, mostly. Pay attention to the people around you. Ask questions. Help when you can. I smiled. And if you're ever running late because you stopped to help someone, don't apologize for it. Yes, ma'am. I made it to my meeting with 5 minutes to spare. My deputy, a Navy commander named James Reeves, gave me a questioning look as I walked in. Everything okay, Colonel? Everything's fine. Just helping an airman with a car problem. He nodded, didn't ask for elaboration, and launched into the briefing. We were expanding the unified inventory system to coalition partners, starting with NATO allies. It was complex, sensitive work that would require 18 months of negotiations and technical integration. The kind of project that would define the next phase of my career. But for the rest of that meeting, part of my mind was on Airman Parker, waiting for his tow, heading to Germany, about to begin his own story. I hoped someone would help him along the way. I hoped he'd learn to help others. I hoped he'd find mentors and opportunities and moments that changed his trajectory. I hoped he'd remember that rank was temporary, but kindness was permanent. The coalition integration project consumed the next 2 years. I traveled to Brussels, London, Berlin, Warsaw, coordinating with allied logistics commands, learning their systems, finding ways to make our platforms communicate. The work was diplomatic as much as technical, requiring patience and cultural sensitivity alongside strategic thinking. I turned 42 in Brussels, 43 in Washington, 44 on a military transport flying back from a conference in South Korea. The years blurred together in a rhythm of meetings, briefings, site visits, and endless PowerPoint presentations. I was good at this work. I knew that. But somewhere around month 18, I realized I was tired. Not burned out exactly. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of 16-hour days and constant travel and always being responsible for programs that affected thousands of people. Rena noticed during one of my rare visits home. You look exhausted. I'm fine. You said that 5 years ago, and you weren't fine then either. This is different. How? I'm older. I know my limits now. She studied me for a long moment. You're thinking about retiring. I hadn't been, consciously. But the moment she said it, I realized it was true. Maybe. Eventually. How long? I'm eligible at 25 years. That's 3 more. And then what? I don't know. Consulting, maybe. Teaching. Something quieter. You'll be bored within 6 months. Maybe. But maybe that's okay. I sipped my coffee. I've done good work, Rena. Important work. But I'm not sure how much more I have in me at this pace. Have you told anyone? No. And I won't for a while. But I'm thinking about it. 3 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Virginia area code, Pentagon Exchange. Colonel Cross. Esther, it's James Murray. I sat up straighter reflexively, even though he couldn't see me. Admiral, it's good to hear from you, sir. I'm not an admiral anymore. Just James. He sounded amused. I'm calling because I need your advice. My advice, sir? James, he corrected again. I've been asked to teach a senior seminar at the Naval War College. Strategic Logistics in Joint Operations. They want someone who's actually done it, not just studied it. He paused. I told them they should ask you instead. Sir, James, I'm still active duty. I can't, not now. But you're eligible for retirement in 3 years. They're willing to wait if you're interested. I stood up, walked to my office window overlooking the parade ground. Officers crossed the lawn below, hurrying between buildings, carrying briefcases and tablets and the weight of their own responsibilities. How did you know I was thinking about retirement? I didn't. But you've been at this for 20 years. You've accomplished more than most officers do in 30. And you're at the point where the next step is either flag officer or something else entirely. He was quiet for a moment. I've been where you are. The work is still important, but you're starting to wonder if someone else could do it just as well. If maybe it's time to let the next generation step up. Is that what you felt? Every day for the last 2 years before I retired. I loved the work, but I was tired of the politics. Tired of fighting for budget. Tired of explaining to people who'd never worn a uniform why logistics matters. He cleared his throat. Teaching is different. You're still serving, just in a different way. Shaping how the next generation thinks about problems instead of solving the problems yourself. I don't know if I'd be good at teaching. You've been teaching for 20 years. Every junior officer you've mentored, every system you've redesigned based on user feedback, every time you've explained complex logistics to a general who just wanted a simple answer, that's all teaching. He paused. Think about it. You don't have to decide now. But the offer stands. We talked for another 10 minutes about his retirement, his fishing trips, his occasional frustration with civilian life's lack of structure. When we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the calendar on my wall. 3 more years. 25 years of service. From second lieutenant to colonel, from flight operations to joint logistics command, from that rainy morning outside the gate to this office with windows and a staff that ran programs affecting the entire Department of Defense. It was enough. Maybe more than enough. I called Rena that evening. I'm going to retire. When? 3 years. When I hit 25. She was quiet for a moment. How do you feel? Relieved. Scared. Certain and uncertain at the same time. That sounds about right. I heard her moving, probably to somewhere more private. What will you do? I told her about the Naval War College offer. About teaching. About the idea of shaping how future officers thought about logistics and leadership instead of running programs myself. You'd be good at that, she said. You've always been good at explaining things. Making complex systems understandable. I hope so. Esther, are you doing this because you want to or because you're tired? It was the right question. The honest question. Both, I admitted. I'm tired. But I also want this. I want to wake up without checking email at 0500. I want to work with students who are excited to learn instead of managing officers who resist change. I want to have time to think about problems instead of just reacting to them. Then do it. You've earned the right to choose what comes next. The decision, once made, brought unexpected peace. I still worked 16-hour days. I still traveled constantly. I still managed crises and navigated politics. But underneath it all was the knowledge that this had an endpoint. That I was building toward something else instead of just pushing forward indefinitely. I told my deputy, Commander Reeves, about 6 months later. We were in Brussels, late evening after a long negotiation session with French Logistics Command. Sir, can I ask you something? Of course. How long are you planning to stay in this position? The question surprised me. Why do you ask? Because you're eligible for flag officer. Everyone knows that. But you haven't put your name forward for any of the boards. And you've been training me to take over more of the strategic planning. He hesitated. I just want to know if I should be preparing for something. I appreciated his directness. I'm retiring in 2.5 years. When I hit 25. And yes, I've been training you because you'll be my recommendation for this position when I leave. He sat back, processing. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing good work. Say you'll remember that systems serve people, not the other way around. Say you'll stop to help the occasional airman with car trouble. He smiled. I don't know that story. Ask Commander Gwynn sometime. She tells it better than I do. Word spread quietly over the next year. Not officially, I wouldn't announce my retirement until the 6-month mark, but people knew. They always did. The questions changed in meetings. Instead of, what do you think, Colonel, it became, how would you handle this? Training questions. Legacy questions. Torres called me in month 22. I heard you're getting out. News travels. It does when it's news worth hearing. She was quiet for a moment. You going to miss it? Parts of it. Not all of it. The politics? The politics. The budget fights. The explaining basic logistics to people who should understand it by now. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. I won't miss the travel. Or the PowerPoints. What will you miss? I thought about that. The people. The feeling when a system finally works the way it's supposed to. Knowing that what I did today might help some young officer complete their mission 6 months from now. I paused. The sense of purpose, I guess. Of being part of something bigger. You'll still have that. Teaching is purpose work. I hope so. It is. Trust me. I've been doing guest lectures at Quantico for 3 years. Best part of my month. She cleared her throat. Listen, a bunch of us want to throw you a retirement ceremony. When you're ready. Nothing huge, just the people who've worked with you over the years. Will you let us? Torres, I'm not asking, Colonel. I'm telling you. You've given 25 years. Let people say thank you. Okay. When I officially announce. Good. Because Hayes is already planning the menu and Chern has a speech prepared. You're not getting out of this. I announced my retirement in month 23, 6 months before my terminal leave date. The formal announcement went through channels, memorandum to my chain of command, notification to personnel, official letter with all the proper format and language. But the real announcement happened in conversations, hallway exchanges, quiet acknowledgments of time passing and chapters ending. My parents flew in when they heard. My mother cried, happy tears she said, though I suspected they were complicated tears. Pride and relief and maybe some grief for the years of deployment and danger that were finally, definitively over. I'm proud of you, my father said. We were sitting in my quarters, sharing a beer, something we'd rarely done because our time together was usually formal measured. Not just for what you accomplished. For knowing when to stop. Is that what I'm doing? Stopping? No. But you're choosing what comes next instead of letting the system choose for you. That takes wisdom. He sipped his beer. A lot of officers hang on too long. Chase stars they'll never get, fight for positions they don't really want, because they don't know how to be anything except military. You're not doing that. I'm scared I won't know how to be anything else. You will. Because you're not just a colonel. You're also a woman who stops to help strangers. Who mentors young officers. Who redesigns systems because they don't work for the people using them. He met my eyes. The uniform is what you wear. Kindness is who you are. You'll figure out how to keep being that person without the rank. The retirement ceremony happened on a Friday in September, 5 years and 4 months after that morning in the rain. They held it in the same building where I'd interviewed for the staff billet, though in a larger room. 200 people attended. Officers I'd worked with, coordinators from the liaison program, logistics chiefs from all 4 branches, students from programs I'd guest lectured at, and friends who'd kept me sane through 2 decades of chaos. My retirement ceremony was held on a Friday in September, 5 years after that morning in the rain. 200 people filled the room where I'd once interviewed for a staff billet that seemed like the pinnacle of my ambition. Rena spoke about the captain she'd met in Germany who was always 15 minutes early and never said no when someone needed help. Torres talked about the major who'd built a program that actually worked because she'd listened to the people doing the work. Commander Reeves, my successor, talked about the colonel who'd trained him in leadership, not just logistics. Then Admiral Murray walked in. I hadn't known he was coming. He'd sent a card when I announced my retirement, but he was teaching in Rhode Island, and I'd assumed the distance was too far. He walked to the front in a suit, no uniform, wearing a quiet smile. I wasn't planning to speak today, he said. But Colonel Cross changed my plans before, so it seems appropriate she'd do it again. People laughed. I met Esther 5 years ago when my car broke down outside the gate. I was late, frustrated, out of options. She was later, rushing to an interview, and had every reason to keep driving. But she stopped, gave me $100 and told me to get a tow. I bring this up not because it led to her career, though it did, but because it illustrates something important. The best officers don't help because they'll get something from it. They help because it's the right thing to do. He looked at me. You've spent 25 years stopping for people who needed help. Sometimes that meant fixing their cars. More often it meant fixing systems that weren't working, mentoring junior officers who felt lost, or redesigning processes everyone else accepted as immutable. You saw problems as opportunities to serve, not burdens to avoid. The Air Force is losing a remarkable officer. But the Naval War College is gaining something better, a teacher who understands that logistics isn't about systems and supplies. It's about people trying to complete impossible missions with insufficient resources. And you've spent your entire career making those missions a little less impossible. After the reception, Admiral Murray found me by the cake table. You ready for civilian life? He asked. I told him to ask me in 6 months. He finished a cookie and offered one last piece of advice. Remember that morning. Not the interview or what came after. Just the moment when you decided to stop. Hold on to that version of yourself, the one who helps without calculating the return. Because teaching is full of moments when you'll be asked to do more than your job description requires. The rank won't compel you anymore. It'll just be you and your character. I started teaching at the Naval War College that January. On the first day, I told my 24 students about that rainy morning, about stopping for a stranger, about walking into an interview room and seeing him behind the desk. I tell you this not because it had a happy ending, I said, but because it illustrates the central tension in military logistics. The question you'll face over and over is, do you do what's efficient, or do you do what's right? And can you build systems that make those two things align instead of conflict? The semester flew by. Admiral Murray sat in on one of my classes in week 10, then walked the campus grounds with me afterward. That story you tell about the morning we met, do you tell it in every class? He asked. I told him yes, first day of every semester. Because it's true. And because it reminds them that rank and authority are temporary, but character is permanent. That summer, I received a letter from Airman Parker, the young officer I'd helped with car trouble my last year on active duty. He'd stopped to help a stranded German civilian outside Ramstein Air Base. The civilian turned out to be a local government official who later helped expedite a facilities issue for his unit. I thought about what you said, he wrote, about helping people even when you're late. I almost didn't stop. But I remembered you stopping for me. So I stopped. And it mattered. On the 10th anniversary of that rainy morning, Admiral Murray called me to a coffee shop. He handed me a small box. Inside was a framed $100 bill with a card, for stopping, for helping, for remembering that rank is temporary, but kindness is permanent. He told me it wasn't the same bill, he'd spent that one on the tow truck, but it represented the same thing. 10 years ago, you gave me $100 without knowing who I was or what it might mean. You just saw someone who needed help. That decision changed your career. But more importantly, it reminded me that the best officers are the ones who don't let rank change who they are. I hung the frame in my office above my desk. Students ask about it sometimes. I tell them the whole story and watch them process the idea that one small act of kindness could cascade into a career, a program, a legacy. I'm 54 now. I've been teaching for 9 years. I still walk past that gate sometimes when I'm visiting the base, looking at the spot where I stopped and made a decision that seemed small at the time but changed everything. Last week, a Marine captain stopped me after class. That story you tell. About stopping for the Admiral. Did you ever regret it? I told her no. Because being on time isn't the same as being right. And because the person you are when no one's watching is the person you actually are. Everything else is just performance. She asked if I still carry a $100 bill. I showed her the folded bill in my wallet. Always. Because you never know who might need help. I understood, finally, that Admiral Murray had been right all along. It wasn't about the interview or the career or the programs I'd built. It was about choosing to see people who needed help and having the courage to stop. Everything else, the rank, the positions, the legacy, was just what happened when you made that choice consistently for 25 years. The best thing you can do in any moment is simply help the person in front of you who needs help. Everything else takes care of itself. I'm Esther Cross. One stop in the rain changed my career and how I lead. If this resonated, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who wears a uniform or leads a team. Your turn. Have you ever helped a stranger and realized it mattered more than you knew? Would you have stopped if you were late to a career-defining interview? Why or why not? When has doing the right thing cost you or paid off at work? How do you balance protocol with judgment in high-pressure moments? Drop your story in the comments, I read them all.